The man woke up to silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of something unknown. His head hurt, his vision blurred. He touched the floor. It was cold, smooth, and glowing faint blue. He tried to stand, but his arms shook. He was not in his ship. He was not on Earth. He was inside a cage, and the cage was alive with strange energy. He looked around, and his breath caught. Outside the cage stood figures. At first he thought they were humans. Their shape was the same. 2 legs, 2 arms, a head. But then he saw their faces. Their eyes glowed silver. Their skin shimmered faintly like light on water. Their hair flowed long, shining in colors no human hair could hold. Deep green, silver white, and violet like night sky. They were all women. Young, tall, beautiful, in a way that felt both strange and dangerous. They whispered to each other, pointing at him. Their voices carried like soft music, but he could not understand their words. The man pressed his hands against the glowing wall of the cage. It did not burn, but it held him tight, like invisible steel. He was trapped. His heart pounded. One of the alien girls stepped closer. She seemed like their leader. She had eyes brighter than the others, sharp and calm. She studied him the way a scientist studies a new creature. She spoke, her voice firm, and the others fell silent. The man could not understand, but he felt the weight of her words. She was asking a question, asking what he was. He tried to speak. I am human, a man. My name is Daniel. His voice echoed in the chamber. The aliens tilted their heads, confused. They repeated the words softly. Man. Man. And then a wave of shock rippled through them. Gasps, whispers, fear. Their silver eyes widened as if he had said something forbidden. The leader raised her hand and silence returned. She stepped closer, almost to the cage itself. She looked at him as if she did not believe what she saw. Then she whispered a single word, her voice trembling for the first time. Male. The room grew colder. The other girls began talking quickly, their voices sharp and nervous. Some laughed nervously like children seeing a ghost. Others backed away, afraid. A few leaned closer, curious. Daniel's chest tightened. Why were they so shocked? Why did the word male change everything? The leader spoke again. This time her words carried power. The other girls nodded, some with fear, some with anger. Daniel felt his stomach twist. He was not just a prisoner. He was something more, something dangerous in their eyes. Suddenly the cage shifted. The glowing walls pulsed. The floor beneath him moved, carrying him forward like a conveyor. The alien stepped aside, watching him with wide eyes. Daniel struggled to keep his balance as the cage moved down a long tunnel. The walls were covered with glowing symbols, pulsing like veins of light. He had no idea where they were taking him, but one thing was clear. He was being delivered deeper into their world. As the cage slowed, he saw a massive chamber ahead. Tall crystal pillars rose high into the shadows. Strange machines hummed, and alien symbols floated in the air like living light. Dozens more girls stood waiting. All of them stared at him. The cage stopped in the center of the chamber. The leader stepped forward, raising her hand to silence the crowd. Her voice echoed across the room. Daniel understood nothing of her words, but he understood the meaning. He was being shown, displayed, announced. The crowd reacted with a mix of emotions: shock, curiosity, fear. Some of them reached forward, as if wanting to touch him. Others covered their mouths in disbelief. He could feel the tension, the danger, and then one voice cut through the whispers. A young alien girl, her hair violet like twilight, shouted something. The others turned to her in shock. Daniel's cage pulsed again, glowing brighter, as if reacting to her words. The leader's eyes narrowed. She spoke back sharply, her tone heavy with warning. But the young girl stood firm. Daniel's heart raced. He could not understand their language, but he knew one thing. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was a mystery, a problem, a discovery that might shake their world. The leader turned back to him, her silver eyes locked on his, filled with cold decision. She raised her hand. The cage shifted again, lowering him onto a raised platform. Strange lights scanned across his body. The crowd gasped louder. Daniel clenched his fists. He didn't know what they wanted. He didn't know what was coming next. But deep inside, he felt the truth. He was the only man in a world that had never seen one before, and to them, that made him priceless. Or dangerous. The chamber fell silent. Every eye was on him. The leader's lips moved slowly, clearly, as if to mark the beginning of something important. Daniel did not understand the words, but he understood the feeling. His fate was about to begin. Daniel woke with a shock. His wrists and ankles were bound by smooth bands of glowing light. He was lying flat on a cold surface, a table made of crystal. Strange symbols floated above him, turning slowly in the air. The room was quiet, but he could feel eyes watching him. Slowly, he turned his head. At least 6 alien girls stood around the table. Their eyes glowed silver, unblinking. Their faces were calm but curious, like hunters watching an animal they had caught. One girl leaned closer. She touched his arm with a thin rod that glowed. At the tip, Daniel flinched, expecting pain, but instead a soft warmth spread through his skin like the heat of sunlight. The rod hummed and projected a stream of symbols into the air. The aliens gasped and whispered to each other. Daniel's chest tightened. They were examining him, studying him. He was not a man to them. He was a specimen. The leader entered the room. Her presence silenced the whispers. Her silver eyes locked on him with sharp focus. She spoke in their language, calm and commanding. The others stepped aside. She approached Daniel and placed her hand just above his chest, not touching, but close enough for him to feel the strange energy in her palm. His heart pounded. He could feel it. The cage, the table, even her hand. They all carried the same living power. Technology so advanced it felt like magic. She pressed something on her wrist. A beam of light scanned his body from head to toe. The symbols in the air turned red for a moment, then green. The girls gasped again. One of them covered her mouth in shock. Another whispered something that made the rest look fearful. Daniel swallowed hard. "What do you want from me?" His voice shook. "Why are you doing this?" The leader's gaze narrowed. She could not understand his words, but she understood his tone. She replied in her own language, her voice low, almost dangerous. The violet-haired girl from before stepped forward. Her eyes were wide with something Daniel recognized, curiosity. She spoke quickly, her voice rising with emotion. The leader cut her off with a sharp word, but the young girl did not step back. Instead, she pointed at Daniel and then at the floating symbols as if trying to argue. The tension in the room grew heavy. The leader's eyes flashed with anger. For a moment, Daniel thought she would strike the girl. Instead, she turned back to him and spoke again, slowly as if she wanted him to understand. She said one word clearly, almost perfectly shaped for his ears. Male. Daniel froze. The way she said it, it was not just a description. It was a sentence, a judgment. The other girls whispered louder. Their voices carried fear and fascination. Daniel caught fragments in their tone, like children speaking of monsters in the dark. Some saw him as danger. Some saw him as treasure. The leader raised her hand. The table hummed and shifted. Bands of light lifted Daniel into the air so he floated above the crystal surface. More beams of energy scanned him, this time piercing deeper. He groaned as strange heat ran through his muscles, into his bones. The aliens gasped again when a new pattern appeared in the air. The violet-haired girl's eyes widened in wonder. She whispered a word Daniel could not understand, but the sound of it chilled him. The leader's face darkened. She turned to the others and spoke with authority, her voice sharp like a blade. Daniel could not understand, but he could feel the weight of her decision. She was not debating his life. She was debating his purpose. The violet-haired girl protested again, her voice trembling. The leader snapped back, and this time the younger girl fell silent, her fists clenched. Daniel's heart raced. Why did this young alien care? Why was she the only one who looked at him not as a weapon, not as a danger, but as something else? The table lowered him slowly. The glowing bands around his wrists and ankles disappeared. But before he could move, 4 alien guards stepped forward, holding long spears of light. Daniel stayed still. He understood the message. He was free of the table, but not free of them. The leader spoke again, her tone final. The guards grabbed his arms and pulled him off the table. He resisted for a second, but one touch from their spears sent a burning shock through his body. He gasped and stumbled forward. They led him down another glowing corridor. His body trembled, but his mind raced faster. He understood now. These alien girls had never seen a man before. In their world, the very idea of a male was impossible. To them, he was an answer to a mystery they could not explain. But answers are dangerous. He was not just a prisoner anymore. He was proof of something forbidden. As the guards dragged him into another chamber, he caught the violet-haired girl's gaze. She followed in silence, her eyes filled with questions, and something else, something almost like hope. The doors closed behind him with a heavy thud, and Daniel realized the examination was only the beginning. The sound of heavy doors shook the chamber. Daniel stumbled as the guards pushed him forward. Bright light spilled into his eyes. When his vision cleared, he froze. He stood inside a vast arena. The floor was smooth stone, cracked and scarred from battles long before. The walls stretched high, carved with alien symbols that glowed faint blue. Above him, hundreds of alien girls filled the seats, their silver eyes shining in the dark. They were not silent. They cheered, shouted, and whispered like a restless ocean. Daniel's chest tightened. He knew this place. It was not for kindness. It was for testing. The leader of the alien girls stood on a high platform, watching. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp with command. She raised her hand and the crowd went silent. Her voice rang out, clear and strong. Daniel could not understand the words, but the meaning was clear. This was not freedom. This was trial. 2. Guards pushed Daniel to the center of the arena. His hands were free, but his heart pounded. He looked up. All those eyes watched him. He was the only man here, the only one like him. And now, they would see if he was worth keeping alive. A low rumble shook the ground. The floor opened, and from the shadows crawled a beast. Its skin was dark and rough like stone. 4 legs carried its heavy body, and its mouth was lined with sharp, glowing teeth. The crowd cheered louder, their voices rising with excitement. Daniel's stomach dropped. They wanted him to fight. The beast growled, its eyes burning with pale light. It circled him slowly, each step shaking the ground. Daniel's fists tightened. He had no weapon, no armor, nothing but his body. The creature lunged. Daniel rolled to the side, hitting the ground hard. The beast's claws scraped sparks against the floor. The crowd roared. Daniel pushed himself up, his breath fast. He had to think. If he ran, the beast would catch him. If he froze, he would die. He needed to survive. He needed to show them something. The beast charged again. This time Daniel ran toward it, ducking low at the last second. He grabbed a sharp piece of stone broken from the floor. With a desperate shout, he drove it into the beast's leg. The creature roared, stumbling for a moment. The crowd gasped. Daniel's heart leapt. He had heard it. But the victory was short. The beast swung its massive tail, striking Daniel across the chest. Pain exploded in his ribs as he flew back against the wall. The crowd cried out, half in fear, half in thrill. Daniel coughed, forcing himself to stand. His body ached, but his mind sharpened. He had no choice. He had to fight. The beast came again, jaws wide. Daniel grabbed another stone shard and, with all his strength, drove it into the beast's mouth. Sparks and light burst as the shard cut against its glowing teeth. The beast screamed, thrashing wildly. Daniel hung on, refusing to let go. The arena shook with noise. The alien girls shouted louder than ever. Some cheered for the beast, others for Daniel. Their silver eyes glowed with excitement, fear, and wonder. At last, the beast collapsed, its legs trembling. Daniel rolled free, falling hard onto the ground. His chest heaved. His arms shook. But he was alive. Silence filled the arena. Hundreds of eyes stared down at him. Then slowly the voices rose again. Not in laughter, not in fear, but in awe. The leader on the platform raised her hand once more. Her silver gaze locked on Daniel. For the first time, her lips curved slightly. Not into a smile, but into something close. Respect. She spoke a single word. The crowd echoed it like thunder. Daniel stood there, bloody and shaking, but unbroken. The guards rushed forward, pulling him away from the fallen beast. As they dragged him out of the arena, Daniel saw the violet-haired girl in the crowd. Her eyes were wide, her lips parted in shock. She whispered something softly, a word only he could feel, not hear. Hope. Daniel's chest burned with pain, but his spirit did not fall. He had shown them strength. He had proven he was not weak prey. But deep inside he knew the truth. This was only the first test, and whatever came next would be worse. The heavy doors closed behind him, leaving the roars of the alien crowd echoing in his ears. The night in the alien city was never dark. Towers of crystal glowed softly, filling the streets with pale blue light. The air was quiet, but Daniel could not sleep. He sat on the cold floor of his new cell, his body aching from the arena fight. His ribs throbbed, his hands shook. Yet, the only thing louder than the pain was the sound of the alien crowd in his memory, their cheers, their whispers, their shock. He had survived the test, but survival was not freedom. The door of his cell was sealed by a wall of shimmering energy. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Daniel leaned against it, staring out at the empty hall. Guards passed sometimes, their silver eyes watching him with suspicion. Most of them looked at him as if he were dangerous, a threat. But one pair of eyes had been different. The violet-haired girl. She had been there in the council. She had been there in the arena. Her eyes had not been filled with fear or anger, but with something else. Curiosity, wonder. And tonight, when the guards were gone, she appeared again. Daniel's head jerked up as a shadow moved across the hall. The energy wall flickered, and suddenly a small panel opened in silence. The girl stepped inside, her steps light as air. Her hair shimmered violet in the glow, her silver eyes wide and alert. She raised a finger to her lips. "Quiet," she whispered. Daniel froze. It was the first word he had understood clearly. Her voice was soft, uncertain, but it was in his language. "You speak English?" he asked in shock. The girl nodded, slowly. "A little. Learn from records." Her accent was broken, but her meaning was clear. She glanced at the door nervously. "If they find me here, I will be punished." Daniel's heart pounded. "Then why are you here?" Her gaze lingered on him, curious and bold. "Because I must know," she whispered. "You are male. We have no males, not for many ages. They say, you are impossible." Her words sent a chill through him. "Impossible?" She nodded. "Our world, only women. Always, for generations. A man is a story, a shadow, a myth, and now you are real." Daniel sat silently. His mind struggled to take it in. An entire world of only women. No men, no balance. He was not just rare. He was a living secret. The girl knelt closer, her silver eyes studying his face. She touched his hand lightly, as if testing if he was real. Daniel felt warmth in her touch, a fragile curiosity. "What is it like?" she asked softly. "To be male?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "I don't know how to answer that. I'm just me." Her lips curved, not into a full smile, but something close. Strange, different, alive. She pulled her hand back quickly. They will not let you live long. Some fear you, some want to use you, but none will trust you. Daniel leaned forward. And you? Do you trust me? The girl hesitated. For a moment, silence filled the cell. Then she whispered, I want to. Her words carried weight, more dangerous than any weapon. Daniel could feel it. She was risking everything just by being. Here. What's your name? He asked quietly. She looked confused for a moment, then answered. Lyra. Lyra, Daniel repeated, tasting the sound. Why are you helping me? Her silver eyes burned with quiet fire. Because if you die, the truth dies with you. Footsteps echoed in the hall. Lyra's eyes widened. She jumped back, pressing a hand to the glowing wall. The panel began to close. Wait, Daniel whispered urgently. Will you come back? Lyra hesitated, then nodded once. Yes, but you must survive. They will test you again. Harder. If you fail, you die. The wall sealed shut, leaving Daniel alone once more. He leaned back against the cold stone, his mind racing. For the first time since his capture, he felt something more than fear. He felt connection, hope. But hope was dangerous here. As he closed his eyes, he could still feel her touch on his hand, a secret, forbidden moment that could change everything. And outside his cell, the alien city slept under glowing towers, unaware that one girl had broken their laws tonight, unaware that curiosity might become rebellion. Daniel did not know what tomorrow would bring. More tests, more pain, more fear. But he knew one thing: he was no longer alone. The chamber of the council was built like a throne room. Tall crystal pillars glowed with shifting light, casting shadows that moved like living things. At the far end, a wide platform rose high above the floor. On it stood the alien leader, her silver eyes sharp and steady. Around her were other elders, all women, their faces hard with authority. Daniel was dragged inside by guards. His steps were heavy, his body still sore from the arena fight. The crowd of alien girls filled the lower seats, whispering and pointing at him. Their voices rose and fell like a storm. The leader raised her hand. Silence spread across the chamber. She looked down at Daniel as if he were not a man but a weapon. Her voice rang out clear and powerful in words he could not understand. Yet her tone was enough. She was speaking about him, about his fate. One elder stood up sharply, her voice filled with anger. She pointed at Daniel and shouted. The words were foreign, but the meaning was clear. She wanted him dead. Another elder argued back, her tone smooth but dangerous. Her eyes flickered with greed. She wanted him kept alive, but not out of kindness. She wanted to use him. Daniel's stomach turned as the voices clashed. He could not understand their language, but he could hear the division. Half of them saw him as a threat. The other half saw him as a prize. Neither side saw him as human. Then the leader spoke again, cutting through the noise. Her silver eyes burned as she pointed at Daniel. The chamber fell silent, waiting. Her voice lowered, but each word carried like a blade. And then, for the second time, Daniel heard a word in English. Male. The crowd erupted. Gasps, shouts, cries of disbelief. The word spread from one corner to another like fire. Daniel's chest tightened. That single word had power here. It was not just his identity. It was their fear. Suddenly a smaller voice broke through the chaos. Lyra. She stepped forward from the lower seats, her violet hair glowing in the crystal light. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with courage. She spoke quickly, her words trembling but firm. She pointed at Daniel, then at the council, then placed her hand on her chest. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The leader's eyes narrowed dangerously. She snapped a command at Lyra, her voice sharp. But Lyra did not back down. Daniel's heart raced. He could not understand her words, but he understood her defiance. She was speaking for him. The leader stepped down from her platform, her tall figure moving like a shadow across the glowing floor. She stopped in front of Lyra, towering over her. Her voice was low, almost a growl. The crowd held its breath. Lyra's knees trembled, but she did not step aside. For a moment, the two locked eyes, authority against defiance, power against hope. Then the leader turned away, her silver gaze snapping back to Daniel. She raised her hand and the guards shoved him forward onto his knees. The leader spoke to the chamber once more, her tone final. The crowd roared in response, some cheering, some protesting. Daniel's blood ran cold. He knew what this was, a decision. He had been weighed, judged, but his fate was still hanging in the balance. Two guards lifted glowing spears, their tips aimed at his chest. Daniel's breath caught. Was this it? Was this the end? The leader's lips parted, ready to speak the last word of judgment. Then chaos broke out. One elder slammed her hand on the crystal floor, shouting with rage. Another shouted back. The chamber erupted into argument, the council itself divided. The crowd screamed, some calling for death, others crying for mercy. The noise shook the very walls. Daniel's eyes darted across the chaos. And there, Lyra's gaze met his. Her lips moved silently, shaping a single word. Fight. The guards pressed the spears harder against his chest. Daniel's muscles tensed, his mind raced. If he moved now, he could die in seconds. If he stayed still, the council might end him anyway. The leader raised both hands, demanding silence. Slowly, the chamber obeyed. Her silver eyes blazed as she spoke again, her words echoing like thunder. Daniel could not understand the language, but he could feel the weight of her decision. It was not the end yet. She would not kill him today, but she would not free him either. Instead, she had chosen something worse. Another test, another trial, a chance for the council to prove their fear right or their greed worth it. The guards yanked Daniel to his feet and dragged him away. The chamber echoed with whispers and shouts behind him. Lyra's voice rose once more, desperate and angry, but her words were drowned in the storm. As the heavy doors closed, Daniel's chest burned with dread. He had survived the arena. He had survived the council, but he understood now. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was the center of a war not of blades, but of power, and in that war, his life was the prize. The cell shook with sudden force. Daniel jumped to his feet as the walls of glowing energy flickered and cracked. Somewhere above, alarms screamed through the alien city, sharp and urgent. The sound was unlike anything he had heard before, high, piercing, endless. Guards ran, past the hall outside his cell, their silver eyes glowing brighter in the flashing red light. Some shouted orders, others gripped their spears tighter. Something had gone wrong. Something big. Then the door of his cell snapped open. Not by command, but by chaos. Daniel froze. This was his chance. He stepped forward carefully, expecting a trick, but no guards came. Only the scream of alarms and the rumble of explosions far away. He felt the floor tremble beneath his feet. The city itself was shaking. "Daniel!" a voice hissed. He spun around. Lyra stood at the corner of the hall, her violet hair catching the red glow of alarms. She waved frantically for him to follow. Without thinking, he ran. His body still hurt from battles and tests, but adrenaline pushed him forward. The hall twisted into tunnels of crystal, glowing symbols flashing across the walls. Each step echoed with danger. "Where are we going?" Daniel panted. "Out," Lyra whispered, her eyes sharp and full of urgency. "If we are lucky." Guards turned a corner ahead. Their eyes widened at the sight of Daniel running free, spears lifted, glowing with deadly light. "Down," Lyra shouted. Daniel dropped just as a spear shot past, burning the air above his head. Lyra raised a small device from her belt and slammed it against the wall. A wave of energy pulsed outward, slamming the guards back. They hit the floor with sharp cries. Daniel stared at her in shock. "What was that?" "Stolen," she said, quickly. "Move." They ran again. The alarms grew louder, the floor trembling harder. Explosions lit the distance, shaking the tunnels. Smoke filled the air, bitter and sharp. The city was under attack, or tearing itself apart. They reached a wide passage where the ceiling opened into a high tower. Daniel stopped in awe. Through the crystal walls, he saw the alien city from above. Towers of light burned in the night sky. Bridges of energy cracked and collapsed. Strange flying machines swarmed, some firing blasts of light at each other. It was not just chaos, it was war. "Who's attacking?" Daniel asked. Lyra's face was pale. "Our own kind," she whispered. "One side wants you dead. The other side wants you alive. They fight for you." Daniel's chest tightened. "For me?" "Yes. For you." Her eyes locked on his. "You must not be caught. If they take you, one side will use you as weapon. The other will kill you to end the fear. Neither side will let you live free." Before Daniel could answer, a blast of energy struck the tower wall. Shards of crystal rained down. Lyra pulled him into a side passage just as the bridge behind them collapsed into glowing dust. Guards appeared again, their silver eyes burning with fury. This time there were many. "Run!" Lyra shouted. Daniel sprinted, his lungs burning, his heart pounding. The guards' footsteps thundered behind him. Spears of light cut the air, sizzling against the walls. One blast grazed his arm, searing pain into his flesh. He bit back a cry and pushed harder. The passage narrowed into a tunnel. At the far end, a door glowed faint blue. Freedom, or another trap? Lyra slammed her hand against the door. It hissed, open, revealing a staircase leading down into shadows. "Go," she urged. Daniel rushed down, the sound of guards growing fainter behind them. The staircase spiraled deep, the light dimming with every step. At last, they reached a chamber hidden far below the city. It was quiet here. Too quiet. Daniel looked around. Strange machines lined the walls, old and cracked, glowing faintly with dying light. This place was abandoned, forgotten. "Where are we?" he asked. Lyra caught her breath. "An old escape path. Few remember it. It may take us outside the city." Daniel's heart lifted with fragile hope. "Then let's go." But before they could move, a heavy sound echoed through the chamber. Footsteps. Slow, steady, close. Daniel's stomach turned. He knew those steps. Strong, measured, authority in every sound. The leader. She stepped out of the shadows, her silver eyes burning, brighter than the alarms above. Her face was calm, but her presence filled the chamber like a storm. Guards flanked her, their spears glowing. Daniel's breath caught. They had been found. The leader's voice was cold as she spoke, her words sharp. Daniel could not understand, but he knew what she was saying. There would be no escape. Lyra's hand gripped his tightly. Her eyes were wide with fear, but her voice was steady as she whispered one word in English. "Fight." Daniel's heart pounded. His chance at freedom had turned into a trap. The leader's gaze burned into his soul, the chamber filled with silence, and Daniel realized the real battle was only beginning. The chamber shook with the weight of silence. Daniel stood with his back against the cold wall, his chest rising and falling in sharp breaths. Lyra's hand clung to his arm, trembling but firm. Before them stood the alien leader, tall and calm, her silver eyes burning like fire in the shadows. Around her, guards formed a half-circle, their spears glowing bright, trapping Daniel with no way out. The alarms above had faded, but the echo of war still rumbled through the city. Somewhere far away, alien voices shouted, towers fell, and machines screamed in battle. All of it, Daniel knew, was because of him. The leader stepped forward, her long robe brushing the cracked floor. She raised her hand, and the guards froze in silence. Her voice was low but heavy with power. Daniel could not understand the words, but he could feel the meaning. It was a command, a judgment. Her eyes locked on him. Then slowly she spoke one word in his language, her accent sharp like broken glass. "Choose." Daniel froze. Choose. What choice did he have? The leader raised her arm toward Lyra, her silver eyes narrowing. One gesture, and the guards aimed, their spears at the violet-haired girl. The sharp glow lit her face, pale but brave. The leader's voice echoed again, each word cold as steel. Daniel understood enough. Stay with them, accept the council, become their weapon, their prize, and Lyra would live. But if he refused, if he tried to fight or escape, she would die. The chamber's silence grew heavier, pressing against his chest. Daniel's heart pounded. He looked at Lyra. Her silver eyes were wide, but not with fear for herself. Her gaze begged him not to surrender, not to let them win. She whispered one word, almost too soft to hear. Freedom. Daniel's mind raced. He had been tested, beaten, hunted, and caged. He had fought beasts, survived trials, and stood before councils. Through it all, he had never been given a choice. But now the choice was his. And it was the hardest choice of all. His fists tightened. He could kneel, live as their tool, and protect Lyra, but at the cost of his humanity. Or he could fight, risk everything, and maybe lose her forever. The leader waited, her silver eyes burning with certainty. She believed he would surrender. She believed fear would break him. But Daniel was human, and humans did not bow forever. He lifted his head. His voice was low but steady. No. The leader's eyes narrowed. Before she could signal the guards, Daniel moved. He grabbed one of the spears as it thrust toward him, twisting with all his strength. The glowing weapon crackled and he drove it into the floor. A blast of energy exploded, throwing guards back in a wave of light. The chamber shook. Crystal shards rained down. Smoke filled the air. "Run!" Daniel shouted, pulling Lyra with him. They dashed toward the far corridor. More guards swarmed, their spears glowing like fireflies in the dark. Daniel swung the stolen weapon, each strike sending bursts of light against the walls. Lyra pressed another stolen device against the floor. It pulsed, sending a shockwave that knocked enemies aside. For a moment, it felt possible. For a moment, freedom was close. But then the leader's voice cut through the smoke, calm and sharp. She raised her hand and the air itself seemed to lock around them. Daniel's body froze, heavy as stone. The spear slipped from his hands. Lyra cried out, struggling against the unseen force. The leader stepped forward, her silver eyes blazing. "End," she whispered. Daniel's chest burned, his body screamed in pain. He felt his strength slipping away. But deep inside, something pushed back. The same fire that had carried him through every test, every trial. The fire of being human. With a roar, he broke free of the invisible grip, his muscles tearing against the unseen chains. The leader's eyes widened in shock. Daniel lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into the crystal wall. It cracked, glowing, with unstable light. The chamber shook violently. "Daniel!" Lyra shouted. The crack spread like lightning, the wall groaning under pressure. Energy screamed, tearing through the chamber. The leader raised her hands to stop it, but the power was too wild, too broken. Daniel grabbed Lyra and pulled her close. "Hold on!" The wall exploded. Light swallowed everything. When the smoke cleared, Daniel lay on the cold ground. His body ached, his breath ragged. Around him, the chamber was ruined. Shattered crystal, broken walls, unconscious guards. Lyra stirred beside him, her violet hair dusty but her eyes alive. She looked at him with awe. You broke it," she whispered. Daniel pulled himself up, coughing. "No," he said quietly. "We broke it." The leader was gone, vanished in the chaos. The city above still roared with war. But down here, in the ruins, there was silence. Daniel looked at Lyra, then at the shattered path before them. He knew the fight was not over. He knew the aliens would come again, stronger, more desperate. But he also knew this. He had chosen freedom. Not just for himself, but for the chance of something greater. He was no longer just a prisoner, no longer just a test. He was human. And that meant hope. Hand in hand, Daniel and Lyra stepped into the broken tunnel, the glow of distant light guiding them forward. The future was unknown, dangerous, and filled with shadows. But for the first time since his capture, Daniel smiled. Because in the darkness of an alien world, he had found not only survival, he had found purpose. And humanity always fought hardest when hope was at stake.